Hello, everybody. Welcome to show number 206. This is the 30th of July, 2019. We have a very special show today because we've got a special guest coming on in a minute from Norwalk, Connecticut, live via Skype. Julia, I trust you are well.
Indeed.
And any news on any particular front before we get into the show?
Not really.
We have a new split screen of you and me in case we ever want to argue about something,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, that's very good.
But delighted to have all of you with us, and Julia especially, our coordinating producer, will be taking your comments and questions today as she is monitoring the stream. I remind you, our policy has always been no name calling, and this doesn't just apply to Mr. Rastegar. This applies to me and Julia and everybody else that comes on the show. I think Farzad is our 75th guest. No name calling, no personal attacks, no, coarse language. And if there is, we will excuse you, as New York Yacht Club used to say during the defense trials. We will excuse you from further participation, not only today, but in future. I appreciate very much Farzad coming on. I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion, and we look forward. Let's get on with today's show. First, when we get Farzad on, we're going to be talking everything laser and laser performance and the International Laser Class Association, the vote, which wraps up tomorrow night on whether to change the name or potentially change the name of the class. We'll discuss all that and more with Mr. Rastegar in a moment, but there's first some breaking news. We told you last week about this World Sailing Initiative to tax all the classes, all the Olympic classes, not just their hulls, the hull plaques, which they've been doing at a low level for a long time, but also now all of their equipment in an effort to raise money for world sailing, which we all know is in tough financial shape. But also in this release they issued last week saying this is for independent quality control processes to secure and improve the quality and consistency of the Olympic equipment. Lawyers tell me they're taking on a huge liability rather than allowing the classes to continue to do this on their own, as has always been done. And what to many people looks like a disguised attempt to just raise money on the backs of Olympic sailors, and indeed all sailors in Olympic classes, even if they're not campaigning for the Olympics. Well, anyway, it's a strange situation. Now, I am aware that there is a statement coming out. One hears, in fact, I'm told that there is a statement coming out on behalf of all the Olympic classes in just a few minutes, and I have the cover memo, which is going to the council and the leadership of World Sailing, and it reads as follows. Dear council members, the Olympic Classes Subcommittee, on behalf of the future 2024 Olympic classes and builders, would like to express their united position regarding the latest correspondence from the World Sailing CEO on the 1% fee set through the Olympic contract to all equipment users for 2024. As much as the present Olympic classes understand and support the objective to ensure optimum quality across all Olympic equipment, we feel a 1% fee set by Olympic contract is not the best way to ensure this goal. We welcome a more transparent and clear process through Regulation 10.3C, as well as a process that would not impact all the sailors using Olympic equipment, nor the manufacturers that are already complying with the expected quality level. We believe there are multiple ways to achieve this objective in a more simple, effective, transparent, and fair process. This is the reason why the Olympic Classes Subcommittee, this is World Sailing's committee, through the World Sailing Classes Committee, is proposing a submission to openly debate this point with the Council at the next November conference, which is in Bermuda in November. Please read most of the reasoning below. That will be in the press release coming. We welcome your feedback and look forward to discussing this important matter next November. And that's Corinne McKenzie from France, who actually is the manager of the Finn class, writing this. But I'm told by several people connected with the Olympic classes that this is a unanimous position of all those classes, the class managers, the class leadership, and this, I think, is the proper way, because absent this submission and absent a discussion in November, it's just a fiat, another top-down fiat from World Sailing, which is not fair and correct. You make a submission, the member national authorities, the international class associations, the manufacturers, everybody then can take this home, discuss it, get prepared, send their delegates to Bermuda in November for the annual meeting, and have a fair and frank and transparent and open discussion. Julie, I'm sure you agree with that.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, that's just kind of a no-brainer. Okay, so that's the breaking news. I don't have the actual statement, thanks to several of you who did forward this cover memo, which is going out with a statement in the next few minutes. Let's get on with our show today, and I appreciate again very much that being forwarded to us. Now, this segment with Farzad Rastegar was precipitated in part by a guest editorial by Tracy Usher from July 17th, and I ran it on Sailing Illustrated. I'd been trying to get Tracy, who I don't know well. He lives here in the Bay Area. I've met him once or twice at St. Francis Yacht Club, to get him to come and state the ILCA, the International Laser Class Association, position. And he did finally, and I ran this editorial. So this is not, hey, you're giving Mr. Farzad a chance, Mr. Rastegar a chance to talk, and now you've got to give the laser class. This is Mr. Rastegar's opportunity to rebut some of the points in Tracy Usher's guest editorial and some of the other stuff that's been going on at these meetings at the Laser Worlds in Japan and up in Kingston where the Laser Youth Worlds are going on, and so on and so forth. So if the laser class or anyone else wants to sometime down the road say something contrary to or in support of what Mr. Rastegar says today, and I know not what he will say, we're all welcome. You're welcome to do that. Indeed, you're welcome to comment and ask questions today because, as I said, Julia is studiously, right?
Right.
Julia, studiously monitoring the comments as we go along, and I, with that, want to welcome very much from Norwalk, Connecticut, live via Skype, Mr. Farzad Rastegar, who is originally Iranian by birth but has been living in the U.S. for a long time, and he is the head of Laser Performance, one of, if not the largest boat builders, small boat builders in the world, not only the Laser but the Sunfish and any number of other boats. Farzad, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Do you want to open with any kind of an overall overarching comment or statement about what I've just said or what we're talking about here today? And again, I appreciate very much your coming on.
Indeed. First, I would say we'd very much like to be considered to be the best manufacturer as opposed to the largest manufacturer. We've tried very hard, and I think we've earned that position in many ways, with our supply quality, but as well as our after-sales services. So our pride is not in size, but in quality. In respect of the earlier comments you made about word sailing and the fees, I happen to strongly disagree. That is not Laser Performance's position for several reasons. Number one, yes, word sailing needs the money, but the contributions, by dinghy sailors, is quite minimal to their overall budget. Two, in fact, the bulk of that increase will be coming from Laser Performance, assuming things remain the same, as they are now, direct or indirect. Third, they do need the money for a bona fide purpose, which is qualifying, and ensuring one, design compliance and other aspects of compliance with word sailing rules, a responsibility that many classes have failed to deliver. And in this case, when you look at ILCA, ILCA had not visited Laser Performance's facilities for the past 4 years, 5 years. They did take the position, only a few months ago, that they want to discontinue Laser Performance as a builder because of their right to inspect. But the reality is that when they did have the right to inspect, they never bothered to inspect. And there are other classes which I don't really want to refer to, who have never thought, of inspecting, our facilities or our procedures. So it's really been dependent, on the builder, being us in this case, to perform well, and to deliver the one design. And we have. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily the case with all. And also, I think even for us, it's very healthy, to make sure, that the class does audit us. Just leaving it, to our good offices, is not adequate. And it's certainly not what is intended by word sailing. So word sailing trying to do this is a good idea. I think it's a great idea, should be supported.
Okay, so let me just be sure I understand. Farzad, so you support this World Sailing collection of some money to do this enforcement of one design nature of these classes?
Yes, we do. It's a nominal fee. We do support it, but what we do suggest to them, which we have already communicated to them, and I hope it will be considered, is that there's a simpler way of collecting that money as opposed to the rather burdensome administrative format that they've created, for it. So it's not about the money, it's about the way they collect the money. But you mentioned fiat, and what World Sailing is doing top down, on costs. Well, when you take the case of the classes, including ILCA, which seems to be in the opposition group, to the fees World Sailing, as you said in your earlier comments, the ILCA proposal to increase fees to do the same things, that World Sailing wants to do is, to be precise, adding $600 to the costs of a laser boat, a basic laser boat, which by the time it gets to the consumer, you're talking about 3 times to 4 times, multiple, in the cost by the time it goes through dealers and dealerships. And it's done, unilaterally. It's done top down, by fiat, and is inexplicable. Certainly the bulk of that fee, is going, to another builder by way of royalties, which has nothing to do with the class, and the rest of it is going to administration of the class, because all new boat builders will be paid for by the new builders anyways. And we have objected to that. That seems to be the only sticking point existing between us and Laser Class Association. It's the imposition of this $600 fee, which we consider wholly unacceptable, on top of the 1% fee, of World Sailing. So put it in comparison, consider yourself World Sailing and consider yourself Little Ilka, and see which one is the more reasonable one. But the approach seems to be the same. If World Sailing is by fiat, certainly ILCA, is by fiat and mandate.
Well, except there's one difference, is that ILCA, at least in theory, represents all of the owners. And the other classes have a class association, which represents the owners. They have elected leaders, and I get that. What I think ILCA doesn't quite understand is that a long time ago, and I don't want to get into the lawsuits and all the history here. I want to get into a solution. You tell us what the solution is. But you own the IP. You own the intellectual property to the name Laser. And one, I can't imagine the laser class getting kicked out of the Olympics for any reason anytime soon. And I can't imagine that you and ILCA and the other 2 builders, what is it, Performance Sailcraft Australia and Performance Sailcraft Japan, that somehow you won't all get together and resolve this because it's the best thing for the sport, it's the best thing for the Olympics, it's the best thing for world sailing. And somehow, some way, you will sort out the fees and the intellectual property, the IP. I'm confident you will. I'm disappointed that World Sailing hasn't sat you all down. I mean, I feel like Julia could sit you all down here, or I could in some number of hours, days, maybe a week, have some kind of a solution. What is that solution? Farzad, what is that solution with Mr. Usher, with World Sailing, with the other 2 manufacturers?
Well, World Sailing has tried to sit us down. For 3 years, we've been asking to have an all parties sit down, with Laser Class. Mr. Usher himself, I flew to San Francisco, I had lunch with him, tete-a-tete. We discussed, the issues, we were fully in agreement on all fronts. We agreed to have an all parties meeting. It never happened. We had dates, they never showed up. So World Sailing has done its part. I don't believe World Sailing is in the enforcement regime. They can promote things. Indeed, we had certain differences, with the Sunfish class on very similar matters. World Sailing uses good officers, to bring us together, sit us down. Those matters were resolved, and now we are on a very constructive path, with Sunfish class, to help them, grow the class, a matter, of partnership, a matter of mutual interest, and a matter of being reasonable. Everyone knowing where they stand. We have certain rights and obligations. They have certain rights and obligations, and we are working together respectfully, and constructively. So ILCA haven't done that. ILCA chose, some 2.5 years ago to go a different path. They have been working on a name change, and a structural change. So the version of the documents that we saw presented to us only recently, interestingly enough, perhaps by error, we were on draft 11. The first draft that we got was draft 11. Both PSA and PSJ were involved, in that. The image that you show is one of those creations after 2.5 years of hard work on their part to register a name, to create companies, to hold intellectual property, to patent products, all the things that are not allowed by their constitution as it currently exists. If they wish to have a constitution change, they certainly can. It has to go through their own process, as provided under the constitution, and that's not something they have followed. So all the activities, all the tremendous expenditures, that they've had, including in getting involved in litigation, supporting the PSA litigation as a plaintiff, in this case, are beyond mandate, and has had a specific reason, which was they really want, to open the class up under a different name, to have an open class. That wasn't the intent of the laser class. There's nothing sinister in owning intellectual property, and there's nothing sinister, in being dominant or large. The suggestion, that the FRAND policies, or the Olympic equipment policy is because of us or because of laser is wrong. This is a policy that has been promulgated and requested, by the World Council, of World Sailing. It applies to all classes and all boats. In the case of laser, there was a complaint, by a potential builder, devotee, in Italy, to the European Monopolies Commission, complaining against us, laser performance, and our dominant position was evaluated and rejected. It was then referred to Brussels. It was not even considered. Dominant isn't being nasty. Abusing your position is nasty. As it stands, our boats, our laser boats are the cheapest boats that you can find on the market compared to the Australian boat or the Japanese boat. That doesn't sound to me like an abuse of position, or dominance, of supply. Plus, we provide a certain after-sales service that nobody else does. So we support the dealership that no one else does. So that's it. Having said that, the Olympic equipment policy requires certain things, which we have, by the way, fully agreed with. We have no problem with that. We've already communicated it, to World Sailing. So currently, all the things that World Sailing require in order to ensure, that laser continues as an Olympic class, as they've stipulated, for the 1st of August, we have agreed to and is in place. Just to make sure there are no misunderstandings, we have signed any document that we need to sign and sent it to them. And I'm happy to go through the list with you. It's not long. And we have also certified all the documents to which we are a non-party, because you can't just sign a document, that you're not a party to it. But we have put a line underneath it to say totally agreed, with the contents, of this agreement.
Okay, so let me jump in here, if I may. Farzad,
Yes.
Let me jump in here. It sounds to me like you think the laser classes vote, which ends tomorrow night, I guess, at sometime, midnight somewhere, UTC. They have been trying to get their members to vote yes on a change in the class constitution to allow them, not to actually change the name, but to allow them, as I understand it, tell me if I'm wrong, change the name from laser to ILCA, ILCA, International Laser Class Association, shortened down to ILCA. And I showed you those boats a moment ago. Is that what they are trying to do with this vote that has been going on for the month of July and ends tomorrow night?
Yes, and they're doing it North Korean style. So they're doing it, after, they've done everything they need to do. Usually you go to your members and you ask them, do you want this to happen? As opposed to doing everything, registering, spending the money, starting supplying events under the wrong name, doing all the things that you need to do in violation of your current World Sailing agreements, like the recent event, in Canada, in Kingston, Canada, and then putting it to vote of the members. in the process harassing members, including Eurilka, Asia, the rest of the world, and threatening them, directly and indirectly. Directly as ILKA, Mr. Faust, Mr. Usher, indirectly, as PSA, Mr. Hedges, and his lot, who basically come in and tell everyone, you don't like it, resign. You need to support our vote. So the democratic aspects of this, is very reminiscent, of certain countries I left, and brought me to the U.S.
And I understand there's been some people who, and Jean-Pierre Keekins has written an article, for example, and he's a friend of Sailing Illustrated. He's been on here before. I don't necessarily agree with everything he writes, but he has alleged that the class, through using SurveyMonkey, I think is the online voting system they're using, could actually manipulate the outcome of the vote. But I'm not sure that that's really important. I think they're going to have, unless the Europeans, which I guess the bulk of the class membership is actually European, and I know you call them Eurilka, European Laser Class Association,
yes,
as the leadership of that has said, we recommend a no vote. So we'll see how this all comes out. But even so, I mean, the thing that bugs me is that here's a class. I'm going to show a couple of more slides here. And you've just had this amazing world championship again. This class has been going on. I've chaired the jury at the Laser Worlds over the years. I've sailed lasers since the very first year the laser came out. My dad still runs a boat business. He's almost, he's mid-80s, and he still runs a boat business as a laser dealer and a sunfish dealer. And I won the sunfish this and that when I was a kid. So we all have affinities to this class, this wonderful class. And at the Worlds in Japan here not too long ago, you had 159 entries from 57 countries in the men's laser Worlds. And then in the women's, in the laser radial, the couple weeks later had 111 entries from 49 countries. And then up in Kingston just now, we have the laser men's and women's going on. And the the laser youth men and women. And there's something like 209 boats from 32 countries. And this is Matilda Nichols, whose dad, Ben Nichols, is a FOSI, a friend. When we say FOSI, Farzad, that's a friend of Sailing Illustrated. It's like a friend of Bill Clinton's. I think we got it from there. But she had 2 wins in Kingston yesterday, and they had some fluky air today, but she's still on top. But what an amazing, wonderful class. And there has to be a way for you and the other builders and World Sailing and the Class Association, both led by Mr. Usher and Eurilka in Asia, to come together and say, come on, guys, because there has to be a FRAND, fair and reasonable and non-discriminatory, according to the EU, and I think even in the US. There has to be some kind of a FRAND policy which allows other builders to come in and build this boat licensed by the IP holder, which is you, and so that there's a greater distribution, because there are complaints about particularly in South America and in North America, about supply of boats and parts, are there not?
It's the word of false news, and everyone can say anything they like, and ILKA, has certainly been very active, in promoting the false news. The FRAND topic, that you refer to is already well settled. Whatever World Sailing requires, under the Olympic equipment policy has been signed, sealed, and delivered, to them as they requested it. There's nothing that is open on that side. The element, that ILKA is introducing is an ILKA matter, where they're trying to introduce a fee structure, into a builder qualification structure that is incompatible, inconsistent, and they are a non-party to it. ILKA is not an IP holder, is not a builder. That's not what they should do. So trying to collect fees on behalf of PSA in what I consider to be a hostile takeover of the class, to rename it, by PSA, is inappropriate, for ILKA. So the impact, on the laser class and Olympics lies directly, with the executives of ILKA, and with PSA, not because of our unwillingness, to do what you just suggested, including, following the FRAND requirements, of World Sailing. That's agreed and settled. So indeed, we look forward, to new applications, from South America to open that market up, We've actually been asking ILCA, to allow new builders in China, in Asia, that they have steadfastly refused, to qualify, and that's because logistics is a big part, of the cost of participation, and it needs to have local manufacture if we want to grow it internationally. And the reality is that under this ILCA's leadership, we haven't seen much growth of the class internationally. We've been seeking to have this program. This is, by the way, exactly what we're working on currently, very constructively with Sunfish class. We haven't seen that. We haven't been able to get their attention, to qualify a builder in China. I think we know the reasons. I don't want to elaborate on that. But there's nothing that stands in the way of Olympic policy and FRAN between us and World Sailing and ILCA. What stands in the way is the fee attempt, the collection of fee, which ILCA is trying, to promote, and under a smokescreen, of FRAN for PSA. We're very happy to share with you the details of the fee, how it's to be collected and how it's to be shared. And you will see for yourself where the $600 goes.
So ILCA is, if I can just interject here, because this is news to me, frankly. So
yes,
you're saying that ILCA is the International Laser Class Association, Mr. Usher, Mr. Faust, are trying under this latest arrangement with World Sailing to collect a $600 fee per boat as a class association fee, so that they can, in essence, run the class and pay the class manager, or what's that all about?
They call it, yes, the title they give it, as I said, is false news, the word of words, false news. The title is qualification fees. That is not correct, because the qualification agreements, for a new builder qualification agreement already fully covers the expenses involved to be paid by the new builders.
So if they would, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
The second part of it is the additional fees that they want for ILCA, for administration, and for PSA group. Those are the two major groups, that account for $600 in increased fees, on top of what the new builder has to pay, and on top of the 1%, of World Sailing. The $600, will be largely going to ILCA's administrative fees, needs, and it should not be part of the qualification agreement. Interestingly enough, Mr. Usher agrees that these are two separate agreements, but he insists that they need to be party to both agreements. We believe, and we've said, that these are two separate agreements, but ILCA needs to be party to only one of them, which is the new builder qualification agreement. The other one, which is a fee agreement for Performance Sailcraft Australia Group, is not a matter for ILCA. They shouldn't really be taking the side of any one builder. And as far as we're concerned, the administrative part, which they want to raise, should be raised through a budgetary process that is governed, through the Constitution, by the Constitution of current Laser Class Association, goes to their World Council, they vote an increase, they increase the plaque fees, we will pay it. We have questioned why they need additional costs. And my concern was that this would be an annuity in perpetuity type of thing for a lifetime, for Mr. Usher, when he retires, from teaching, to come and continue to be the president and pay himself a nice salary, which is what Eric Foss does. So what we've proposed, to be reasonable, was, okay, increase the administrative fees through the right process, of budget and World Council of ILCA, not through a separate side agreement. You cannot have two sources of revenue, you have to have one process. But then, will you commit to term limits? The whole world, of politics and management have term limits. The US presidency has term limits. Everywhere you have term limits. Will you commit to term limits? And the benefit of term limits is twofold. One is it allows new blood, to come in at the end of whatever that term limit is, which helps, with gender participation, which this class has miserably failed, to bring about. Also, helps, bring about youth participation, which this class has miserably failed to bring about. And I think, having more female participation is a good thing. I also think having more youth participation is a good thing. And the last thing you want to have is a lot of angry white men, sitting at the helm, of the class, into their 90s and into their later years, running the class and organizing just masters.
Oh, okay, but I can't. I mean, the laser masters is amazing too. I mean, this is an amazing
class.
Of course
it is.
And the masters is fantastic, and year after year. So I can't believe that Tracy Usher. As I said, I don't know him well. I've only met him a couple times. We're members of the same local club, St. Francis here, and I think I've maybe met him once. Maybe had a beer with a bunch of other guys and gals at the bar. I can't believe he Farzad aspires to be president of the laser class for any length of time. Now, Mr. Faust is the class manager, and
he should be very happy with term limits.
Well,
I think
yeah,
and hardly 20-year term limits, but there should be a term limit.
I'm
lifetime appointments.
I'm sympathetic to that because, as you say, the president of the U.S. has a 2-term, 4-year, 8-year total term limit. And the least popular body in our country, Congress, both the Senate and the House, have no term limits. Yeah. And they rank down there at, up right down there with probably the public perception of Kim Jong-un, of KJU in North Korea, as you said.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, the majority, of the members of ILCA are unhappy. If it wasn't for the bullying coming from the North American part, of ILCA, there's widespread discontent, at URILCA and Laser Class Asia, with the class and the way they approach, their business. They don't believe that they represent them. They don't believe, that they're working on. So the unhappiness that exists within the laser class, is very similar, to our Congress.
So Farzad, if everyone in the class is so unhappy, and I take you at your word, and I'm sure there are some people that are unhappy, and it sounds like this is a European and Laser Performance, which is the European builder, but you also build for Europe. Your territory under the previous policies has been Europe, the Africa, I guess the Middle East, and North and South America. But if the sailors voting, they vote. How often is the election for the president or the chairman for Mr. Usher as chairman of the class? Is that every 4 years, or what's that term?
There's a term, I think it's a 4-year term, but it can be forever, it could be repeated, over and over again. These are
hang on. If that's the case,
the only paid positions are the executive positions.
Right.
Okay, the rest are, so the M&A,
is the
M&A somewhere, these are volunteer positions.
Is the president paid?
Don't want to get involved into
Farzad, excuse me, is the president paid?
I don't believe so.
I don't think so either.
At this point.
I think Mr. Faust is paid.
Yes, but my concern is that if they need a budgetary increase, then maybe why do they need a budgetary increase? For litigation, or for paying salaries? Well, I actually believe that you should have a paid executive team for laser. That Laser Performance has proposed that long time, that this class is big enough to have a paid executive team, that is proper, that is standing there, that is able to do its work. Every time we want to talk to Mr. Usher, he's busy somewhere at something, because he's a volunteer. This class needs a readily available executive team. We have also said that should be paid for through plaque fee increases. So in a way, what we're saying is similar. But what we are adding is term limits, if there's a paid executive team. But also we're saying the increase in plaque fees should come through a World Council process, not through a separate side agreement, that it squeezes in there. This is like the pork belly laws, in Congress. You put a line item there, pay PSA fees, for that. That shouldn't be part of this process. Don't put it into France.
So if the members are unhappy and in Europe, and it sounds like Europe and Laser Performance, because your manufacturing facility is in the UK, right? Do you do any manufacturing outside of the UK?
We do indeed.
Can you tell me where else? Is that
in laser class? No. Laser is exclusively UK.
Yeah, okay, but we're talking about the laser class now. So you manufacture in the UK and distribute to, if I remember well, the Middle East, Africa,
all over the world except Australia, New Zealand, Japan and Korea. And can I just say, if I may, give me a minute, on this, talking about supporting classes and events. We just had an event in Poland with 120 booths, that was supplied by us, fully. So we are by far the biggest supporter, of laser class sailing in the world, anywhere. several times every other builder. The best example I have, in fact, which I think is noteworthy, in November of 2016, there was a world sailing event in Oman. For whatever reason, that was canceled, rather late. With 90 days notice, World Sailing, chose to move that with ILCA's consultation, chose to move that to New Zealand, and they've announced it for New Zealand. Why they did that, you can ask them.
Well, I can tell you why. It's because Oman was not going to allow athletes from certain countries to participate.
Yes, no. I'm talking not about Oman. I'm talking about New Zealand. Why did it go to New Zealand when they hadn't asked PSA to provide the boats? So when they said New Zealand, and then they asked PSA, and PSA said, of course not. There's no way we would be able, to do this, nor will we ever do this. So they declined. So World Sailing came to us, and they said, will you do it? We said, well, it's New Zealand, it's the other end of the world, it's 120 boats, and we have 90 days. How are we able, to do it for a territory that doesn't belong to us?
I got it.
They said, okay,
go ahead.
Hold on. They said, okay, let's see what we can do. So we agreed with World Sailing, with PSA, in the end to provide it 90 days notice and 120 boats. That is not insignificant. We took 120 boats to New Zealand, and then we had to export all of the 120 boats back out, in order not to dilute, the market, for PSA.
No, there's no question. There's no question. The manufacturers.
Let me just say that, because you're saying ILCA and ILCA this, ILCA that. I mean, is one thing, to be the, if you will, the sheep, that they pretend to be. It's another to be the wolf, that is taking, the bait away. Now we have the same event, happening in Kingston, Canada. And they're bringing in PSA boats into that event. Now, this will be another legal battle, that will be coming, but why is it, that in that case, we have to export out, and in this case, they bring it in and they want to sell 80 boats, into our market. So those are good questions, for ILCA, to answer also. But no one has been a stronger supporter of dinghy sailing, than us. Our average annual contribution, to events, and charters is in excess of 400 boats over a 10-year period of time.
Understood. And I, having been involved, you probably don't know this, I was involved in what was an IWARU and ISAF. I was the head of the U.S. delegation for 12 years. I was on the events committee and vice chairman of the events committee for 8 years, and on it for 12 or 16 years, I can't remember. So I understand, and I've been an international judge at your classes Worlds many times. I mean, a handful of times, and at the Windsurfer Worlds back in the day. And I understand more than most the pressures that the manufacturers, the suppliers are under to supply these boats for all these events, because the laser is so popular. Then you have to go sell the boats afterwards. We hosted the World Youth Championship in a similar situation in Fort Worth, Texas in it was in the 80s, maybe 1980. And I mean, we had sailors there like Russell Coots and Chris Dixon and some of the top now sailors in the professional side of the sport who were all at the World Youth. And at the last minute, a country in South America, their currency crumbled. And what was then IWARU called up and said, hey, can you please host this event in someplace in the U.S. in 8 weeks?
Yes.
So I scrambled around, I was then executive director of USRU, and called the Texans up. And at Fort Worth Boat Club, they hosted the thing. And long story short, it was a magnificent event, and the lasers and laser twos, I guess, were the double-handed boats. I can't remember their had to be, sent to Fort Worth instead of to South America, and yada yada. So it's a huge contribution that you and the other manufacturers make. So is this laser performance in the Europeans as a group versus the American leadership of ILCA, and I'm not sure how the American sailors feel, laser sailors, or the North Americans. But is it Europe versus the rest of the world? Is performance sailing Australia, performance sailing Japan, and ILCA on one side of this issue, and is laser performance and the European laser class subset, is this what the conflict is?
It's really not the conflict, but I would say in terms of like-mindedness, your designations are correct.
Okay. So again, let me go. We've got Julia's giving me hand signals here. We've got probably the most number of people on here live we've had in a long time, and there are people all over the world. Farzad, roughly, we have people live from Malta to the east, where it's late in the evening now, to Australia, to where it's very early in the morning, Wednesday. And we have a number of questions, and we've said we'd give them all a chance to ask. Julia, do you have any particular questions you want to put forward while I'm scrolling through my list here?
Yeah, most of them are about availability and service
Of parts.
Of parts.
Boats and parts.
Boats and parts.
In North America and South America?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's ask, Farzad, let me ask you that. What you said it's fake news a minute ago, but we hear continuing complaints about the lack of availability of boats and parts in North and South America in particular. Is that true? And if so, why?
North America and South Africa are very different. By the way, sailors really want to sail. All of these issues are management issues. So we really didn't have the governance. Sailors, would be sort of happier. But the South America and North America are very different issues. South America is a simple issue, of availability of basic boats. That's as a result, of the punitive tariffs and duties, that exist in South America for import of these products into those markets. Whatever we can do, we do. As we speak, we have, in 2 months' time, about 80 boats that go to Sunfish event in Bonaire. And we're hoping, that as a charter boat, for that event, we would then be able to sell some of those in the zone. We are doing these at highly preferential prices in order to seed the market, to promote participation, for the boat in the market. These are things we should be doing in collaboration, with the laser class, the class association. For years, we've been talking and asking the class to support us, to grow the class, take it into Africa. We wanted to start with Morocco. We had the Agadir Boat Club, so we have had zero, take, from the class, on those. With the North American side, is different. They've been what we've heard and has been promoted, by ILCA and the American side is a lot of supply issues. That's different. Supply of parts issues. That's different to the duty issues. In China, the issues are similar. Asia, the issues are very similar. To South America, in terms of availability of the basic boat, but you need to develop and create those. You don't just find buyers in China. It's a very embryonic, sport, in those markets. You really have to work hard at it. You do need class participation. You do need, class management participation actively, to help support, that initiative. It's not just a builder's job. And unfortunately, we haven't had that either. In the United States, there's a measure of truth in respect of supply issues, but I don't believe there have been any this year. I don't believe there has been any last year. It's not about supply of boats. It's been more about supply of parts. There are complex issues involved, with supply of parts. Partly is our fault, but a great part of it is also, the suppliers, that are predetermined and imposed, by the class. Sometimes, it's by just the geography, of things, and how they operate. What is certain is that about a year ago, my colleague, Bahman Kia, the CEO, of the company, approached the class. They said, if you believe there are any supply issues, that is problematic, for your sailors, you need to raise those with us, directly. You can't just complain, and rant, and go online and accuse. You have to share so that we can address it. If we are at fault, we have no problem saying we are at fault. We have no problem saying we have shortcomings. We are not a perfect company. We're just doing our best. And I think our best actually is pretty good in this sector, for where we are. But we haven't had a single complaint, from the class that has come to us in terms of, supply issues. I really don't think we should talk about specific dealer aspects. There are certain dealers, that we have problems with. These are dealers, who have been importing unauthorized boats, or have been engaging in unacceptable practices. So from our point of view, that's a different matter. But the truth is, that there's really no inventory question. There's no issue, that we currently face. We're not aware of it. We'd love to do more. We'd love to sell more. That's our business. So if there are issues, I actually say, why don't the class, put up a section on their website, and call it an open forum, so that every person who has a particular problem, can post, their supply issue, so that we can directly answer in a public manner, to say, what is that issue? Did we have this issue, some issue, or significant issue 3-4 years ago? We did, yes. We had a factory, that we were moving, for various reasons, to another part of the world, so we had those issues.
Okay,
have we resolved them? We have.
Let me break in here and just see if this is the bottom line, and help me understand, help all of our many viewers around the world understand. And Neil Collingridge is asking this, and I think it sums up what a lot of the other questions are. And he's saying, if LP have signed the FRAND agreement, the FRAND part of the deal with World Sailing, and I think you said you have done that, right?
Correct.
Okay. What else needs to be done, and if so, by whom, to secure the Olympics for the Laser Class 2024? What else has to happen now that you've apparently signed the FRAND agreement?
If you allow me to apologize, and if you can bear with my awful accent, and if you
your
give
accent's
me 3
better
minutes,
than mine,
extra.
Come on, we understand you perfectly well, and you're very articulate. And thanks again for appearing.
Let me tell you, what are the documents that World Sailing requires, and we have actually posted those, and we will. I'll ask my colleagues here, to make sure, that they repost it, so that it's immediately available to everyone. World Sailing, requires 5 contracts. We also have written confirmation from World Sailing in terms of what else they may need, or they wouldn't need. So what they need is 5 contracts. One is the Olympic Equipment Policy. That is the formal name of what ILCA calls it, a FRAND agreement. Okay. So the Olympic Equipment Policy is a statement issued by World Sailing. It's not written by us. It's not written by ILCA. It's written by World Sailing.
Copy.
Has 11 points, and this has been signed actually, by ILCA, by us, by Performance Sailcraft Japan. The only party who has not signed it is Performance Sailcraft Australia, PSA. Okay. The second one, and all these documents we're happy to put online. I'll ask my colleagues, to do this.
Good.
The second one is the Olympic Equipment Fee Policy. Now, this is not with us because we're not a party to the agreement. That's between the World Sailing and the class. But in order to make sure there's no misunderstanding on whether we agree with it or not, we have approved it. We've sent, on the document that says fee policy, we've said agreed. That's the 1% you were referring to. We've also added our proposal on how they should collect fees to save on administrative complexity. It's up to them to consider it or not. But the principle and the collection of the fee and the formula, we've said agreed.
And you're going to post these documents?
We can post these documents,
Great.
Indeed. The third one is the Olympic classes contract. That's a contract that, again, is between ILCA and World Sailing. They're the contract parties. Okay. We have, again, signed our name, to the bottom of it, an agreement to the contents of it, which, by the way, with this agreement fully protects, owners of intellectual property. And I may comment on this later on if you allow me the time, but, we put it, it's acceptable and it's signed. It's not, as I said, we're not a party to it, but we've signed it, as approved by us. We have no issue with ILCA entering into that version, of the agreement. Then we have the Olympic classes commercial undertakings, which really is giving life to the Olympic Equipment Policy. This is where the builders, are agreeing to allow new builders, to apply, etc., and their duties and responsibilities, in the process of supplying equipment, for the Olympics. This, we are a direct counterparty, so we have to sign as a builder. We have, and we're awaiting counter signature by ILCA and World Sailing. We have fully executed it and sent it, to them. So we have done our part, on that as well. By the way, in this commercial undertakings agreement, if we fail to act properly and reasonably, following, the equipment policy of the Olympics, there are seriously punitive remedies, for word selling, including practically taking over that tranche of our business to make sure, that the Olympic policy is observed. So
Okay.
I don't think there could be a more punitive remedy, than just what I said, and it's in the agreement. Anyone, who has a penchant for law can read that. And the last document that word selling requires is the word selling class agreement. That's a standard agreement that any international class must have with word selling in order to be a member of word selling. Again, that's between ILCA and word selling to sign. We have the standard draft of word selling. We have approved it. We say we have no contest, or no issues with it. They're welcome to sign it and put it in place. So whatever is not signed is by PSA and by ILCA, who have to sign these, with word selling. Now, what did we need? What did we need for the past 3 years?
Mm-hmm.
As laser performance, we needed a trademark license agreement with ILCA.
Mm-hmm.
Remarkably, ILCA signed it and sent it to us last month. So we're delighted that after 3 years, they've signed it and sent it to us. So they're now operating under the proper authorization of the laser class as the laser trademark.
As the laser
owner,
class, as a licensee of Laser Performance who owns the marks.
Correct. And I hope and trust that individually, as Mr. Usher and Mr. Foss, they will keep that trust that this agreement is for the laser brand, and it's not going to be if you will, the smoke screen, for some form of mischief, using it, for the ILCA name, that they maintain, they have a certain right to, because the goodwill is with the laser class. The next group is what the class needs to have for the class to be happy, and for the class to provide, to word selling, which is the builder qualification agreement. That's all that word selling requires, from ILCA, the class, and that has to be done by the class.
Well, your company agreed to let PSA and PSJ use the laser trademarks as well and give permission to use them, or will they be forced to use another name?
Apologies. Let me answer that separately. You asked for the contract list. Let me say.
Oh, okay.
So this contract number 7 is the new builder qualification agreement. We have signed that. That's an actual signature. ILCA has already agreed that there should be 2 agreements. One should be the qualification agreement, and the second one is the fee agreement, that they're saying.
Yes.
So that's done. What word selling needs is the qualification agreement, which we have signed. What ILCA is imposing, because of PSA, is a fee agreement for PSA. We disagree with that. So in response, to your comments also, which is really the holdup, because they're holding up, the whole Olympic standing, the whole qualification, with word selling, because of a fee agreement, to PSA that will increase the cost of the boats by $600 at cost.
Have PSA and PSJ agreed to this fee?
I don't know about PSJ, but this is a proposal from PSA. It's not an agreement by PSA. It's a proposal by PSA. Again, we'll be happy, to post that. What we have here, is a new builder qualification agreement. The exercise, of FRAM is not, for existing builders just to suddenly become generic and start cross-selling wherever they can. Intellectual property matters. And intellectual property territories are designed. That's why you have trademark holders, and that's why all the contracts have provisions, on trademark. So a new builder in our territory will have the right to build under license with us, a license that has to be reasonable, and a license, that has to be
non-discriminatory,
properly agreed, and non-discriminatory. And
okay. Does that include PSJ?
Well, PSJ has
and
its own
PSA?
territory. If PSJ has, so if it's not for me to go and build in Japan, it's intended for new builders to deal with the issues, of equal supply. This is to address South America. This is to address China. This is to address countries, where you don't have supply. It's not intended to be for Australians, to start selling what they did illegally in the past 10 years to start not doing lawfully, in that. No, that's not the agreement. That's not the intent of FRAND, and it's not intended to make all brands generic.
But
Otherwise, which brand would come and participate in any type of sailing, let alone in any type of Olympic participation?
is PSA and PSJ, are they going to continue as manufacturers? Are they going to be licensed to use the name laser?
They own the trademark laser in their own territories.
They do now.
So they absolutely do. PSJ owns its own trademarks, in Japan and in Korea. PSA owns its own trademark in Australia and New Zealand. We own our trademarks in the rest of the world. So they absolutely can. They are, currently they are authorized builders, under the Olympic agreement, and they are current suppliers, of the boats. The Tokyo boats, under the laser brand are produced, by PSJ.
Okay, well, are we missing Jeff Martin, my old friend? If he were still around, would have this been sorted out? Our late great friend?
I don't think it would have been sorted out. I think it would have just have been continued, to be carrying on there. I think Jeff, was the, if you will, the obstacle, to ILCA and this current practice, of name change and creating a whole new class, what I call the hostile takeover of the class, by PSA, with the support, of Mr. Usher, and Eric Faust. It's a different discussion, altogether. What I can tell you is we all miss Jeff Martin, but Jeff Martin's replacement is Eric Faust, and as far as we're concerned, when Eric Faust was appointed, they wanted to get rid of Jeff Martin. And they asked, Jeff Martin, Bill Crane, our colleague, at the time, he came to me and he said, Jeff Martin is valuable for the class. He's been, a big supporter, of ILCA's activities, and promoting sailing. It's a shame, that he would go. We proposed, to the class to increase plaque fees, the bulk of which was paid by us, in order to be able to support keeping Jeff Martin, as part of the class.
Okay, can I, as a boat builder, or devotee, or PSA, or PSJ, can any of us get a license to build boats in the U.S.? Or if I'm Novo, or whatever the name of that company was, Nautico down in Brazil, can I get a license to start building boats in Brazil under the FRAND, under this new structure?
If all the agreements are signed and in place, they would have to enter a license with us under the same terms and conditions that we discussed, fair, reasonable, non-discriminatory, and the answer would be yes.
Okay, good. If the class come tomorrow night at whatever time the vote cutoff is, and assuming the vote is proper, and until someone shows that it's not, like that World Sailing vote that was in Clearwater last November, clearly was not, but assuming it is democratic and it's not somehow, there's not any Russian interference, shall we say.
Well, that's actually the correct characterization, yes.
But, if the thing is correct, and if the class votes by, I guess it's 2/3 majority, it's got to be 66% of whatever the membership is, to allow the class to change the name to ILCA, what will happen then?
What will happen then is, for them, is a matter for them to determine. For us, the laser brand will continue. We will create a new laser class. The laser class will continue. We will do whatever we need to do to maintain our standing, as an international class. And we certainly will maintain, our standing, in respect of all that we do. So it would be unfortunate, because I don't think that would be necessary. But if they really feel compelled, to do so, that's what would happen. We're not going to go anywhere, and then we'll see, who survives in what condition.
Okay. What do you think what do you think World Sailing will do if there's not a clear path forward come their board? They have a board meeting coming up on the 5th of August. You probably know that, a
Yes.
telephonic board meeting.
Yes.
One hears. And what do you think they will decide at that meeting on the 5th?
In my opinion, if laser class push, for a name change, and that vote is yes, we will be out of the Olympics.
So the laser class is saying if the name change is not supported, they will be out of the Olympics. You're saying if lasers vote to change the name of or to allow them to change the name of the class to ILCA, and hence the votes, they will be out of the Olympics. My guess is you're both wrong, and I've been wrong before, not very often, but
always
rarely in error, but as Julia likes to say, rarely in error, but never in doubt. This class is so cool. It is so widely distributed. It gets in the highest number of countries trying to come to the Olympics in this class. So it's just a shame that this madness continues, and it sounds like it is going to continue. And I can't believe that World Sailing will do anything on the 5th except delay it until the annual meeting in Bermuda, which is what World Sailing normally does with difficult, contentious issues. And I hope that they do that. I hope, because it doesn't sound to me like, tell me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't sound to me like this is going to get sorted out this week.
Yeah, you're quite right. I would not have suggested that on 5th of August, they would make a statement that you're out of the Olympics, but the net result of it would be that we'll be out of the Olympics, so in due course. But it's not going to be later than the November board meeting, of World Sailing.
Okay, so we've got, you agree, and I think you're absolutely right, and as you know, I think that somehow cooler heads will prevail. Somehow it sounds like you're a reasonable, are you a sailor? Have you done much sailing yourself?
I'm not, but I'm inspired by my daughter as a sailor and as a girl. That's why I'm so keen, to make sure that gender participation is promoted.
Well,
and youth participation is promoted.
I couldn't agree more, and that's why I'm keen to see again this. By the way, these boats in Kingston, and this is Matilda Nichols again, who is leading after today, and they got a bunch of kids up there sailing. It's wonderful, and the Masters and the whole thing. Will these boats be left in Canada, or will they be exported?
They may actually be seized more than re-exported. They will
seized.
Not be sold in Canada. We will be taking action, for this unauthorized action, of ILCA and PSA.
Who would seize them?
That's our action.
Say again?
That is our legal action.
Oh, legal action. Oh, okay.
That's right.
Well,
they had no right to do this. This was a complete breach, of the responsibility. I mentioned to you New Zealand. That was our agreement. It goes in, it comes out. No one came to us for that supply, and to the extent that they did, with PSA, they should leave, Canada. So unless they made arrangements that we are not aware of, the boats will either leave the following day or will be seized. By the way, World Sailing, World Council of World Sailing voted for laser class in the Olympics. They did not vote for ILCA. They did not vote for Aero. So it's a very big topic, to suggest, when ILCA suggests, that unless the name change happens, that is totally wrong and a misrepresentation, because the current legal position of World Sailing is the class that is in Olympics, proposed to be in Olympics 2024 is the laser class.
It is the laser, not the ILCA.
So this would require a new application, by ILCA, to go in.
Well, and I think that's a fair point,
your information.
too. Thank you for that, and I think it's a fair point. Julia, you look like you got anything pressing over there?
About 50 questions.
50 questions. We're just not going to have a lot of time to get into any more. I hope if anyone has a pressing question that we have not summarized, go ahead and push it now at the bottom of the comments, because that's where Julie and I are. The number of people watching Farzad has gone up as we've been on now for an hour and 3 minutes, and I really appreciate your coming on. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our viewers have too. There are a lot of people who are also frustrated and who think you are more concerned about the commercial business side of the sport than you are about the sailors and sailing side, which of course always happens between manufacturers and sailors. But what, if I can just boil it down to, unless you've got anything else you want to summarize, but if I can boil it down to one other question, what can happen? What must happen? What should happen between now and the November meeting to make sure this gets sorted out? What is the one or two biggest hurdles to why we don't all say, oh, great, the laser is in the next Olympics and the next 4 years at least, 2024 is secured?
Well, just as a side comment to your earlier point, under our ownership and under our management, the number of laser boats manufactured and sold and promoted have never been higher. So we have seen a steady increase, in laser boat manufacture and participation. We would have hoped that with proper class engagement, we would be able, to even have it higher through geographic expansion. I actually think, that the Olympic equipment policy will provide, for that expansion, sort of, by force. So that's a positive happening overall. Mm. In respect of what should be happening from now until November, I really think it's a very simple matter. Is the laser class dropping, their solicitation on behalf of PSA of a fee agreement that neither is acceptable to us nor is required by World Sailing, to garner a revenue stream, for PSA. Indeed, if they have any administrative costs that they need to cover, that should go through their own process of budget, and vote on it. That means a plaque increase, and if that's the case, then we are a member of that and we'll provide for it. So as far as I'm concerned, all they need to do is sign the documents, and drop this last second document, which Mr. Usher agrees can be 2 agreements. So they're okay, with the qualification agreement. That's all they need to sign. And the one that World Sailing doesn't need, they should just drop it. Because if we need to enter into any agreements, with PSA or PSJ, then it's between us as civilized and mature people, as legal entities, to sit down, and have an agreement between us. And if we don't want to have an agreement between us, then that's fine too. There's no compelling reason that we need to have a tri-party agreement as 3B. What are we going to do? Control, the next generation of new builders through a tri-party agreement? We don't need to. It's all clear and it's all laid out. So all they need to do is sign the document, send it back, hallelujah.
I think we need Henry Kissinger, a young version of Henry Kissinger, to come in and sit the 3 parties down, 4 parties, it sounds like, and come to some kind of an agreement on behalf of the sport, on behalf of the class. I think you included, Farzad, have the future of the sport and the laser class at heart. And I'm worried about the supply issue. I'm worried about, because I keep hearing stories here in the U.S., and somehow, some way, it was simple in the fin class and the star class, the tornado class. Anybody could build a boat. If I wanted to go into my garage and build a boat, and as long as it met the standards, it could measure, and it met in the fin class, the Lambolet test, the star class, there were a little bit some tolerances, I could build a boat in my garage. And then if my boat turned out to be okay, my friends might ask me, and I would get licensed by the class to build some boats. Then came along the laser, and the very popular boat in the 70s, and the so-called SMOD, single manufacturer one design, and it served the sport, I think, well for a long time. And now we're seeing that sort of come apart. And I hope somehow this gets resolved so that people can build boats all over the world with proper licensing, with proper documentation, and that the class can not only survive but thrive with the support and agreement of the builders. Is that just too Pollyanna? Am I just being too, pie in the sky?
Not at all. You're not. I do think the sailors just want to sail, and they really don't want to be involved, with these things, So I think proper governance would also be a good addition to your suggestion.
Good. Well, I hope you're meeting again with the other builders, so that maybe it sounds like a big part of the conflict is PSA and laser performance.
Yes. And an unnecessary part, from World Sailing's perspective. I don't believe, why, I cannot understand why ILCA should take the position that they need to bat for PSA. They really shouldn't. They should bat for the sailors. Their stakeholders are the sailors, are not the builders. So for a document and this arrangement that is unnecessary to the purpose, the holding everything up, is unacceptable.
Can I ask you one other question that I didn't want to get into this, but the whole thing between ARC, the rigs that were being developed or have been developed on behalf of, I guess you, Laser Performance, in Marblehead with Doyle, and I'm not sure Doyle Sales, whomever else, and then also these rigs that apparently are being developed in Australia or have been developed by PSA, Performance Sailing Australia. Are we done with all of that? Are we just going forward with Laser Standard? and laser radial for 2024, whichever way, or are one of these rigs going to come to fore?
But the C5 or whatever it's called that it was developed, by Australians, New Zealanders, that has been an initiative which remarkably has been involved in ILCA for the last 2.5, 3 years. So ILCA has been doing this all stealth on their own, with no information to us, or to their constituents. So to me, that's also another breach, of the fiduciary responsibilities, of as individuals of Tracy Usher and Eric Faust. Our rig is rather different, is not intended, to be anything other than a version, an option for anyone who wants to have it. It will expand the user base. It has no interference, or anything to do with what is Olympics, or otherwise is a world sailing rank.
Okay, well, some of our viewers and a couple of the keen people who are on here, we have a pretty large following these days. One is saying the Optimus class got so much better when more builders were approved, better products at cheaper prices. The laser is crying out for a similar model. And then another is saying, Tom, all we need for a worldwide manufacturing process is a moment of inertia, a Lambolet test like they have in the fin, and weighing. I was surprised to learn that up in Kingston, for example, they don't weigh the hulls, because I know we used to buy, my dad's business in Michigan, we used to buy lasers by the boxcar load and Sunfish. And when I was competing in those classes, I darn well, and I wasn't sophisticated enough to know about master rake in those days, but we used to go through the boats and find out which one were the lightest and then which ones we thought were the stiffest. And we were sailing in flatwater lakes, and those are the boats we try to sail for ourselves. And I'm not unproud of that, but it happens. And I think there's got to be a measurement part of this whole process. It seems to me that the laser, I hear all the allegations. And a good friend of mine is John Bertrand, who coached down in Australia, the American John Bertrand, as well as the Aussie John Bertrand. And we hear all the stories, some of them are horror stories, about stiffening in boats and lightness of boats and being able to order. I've seen documentation from our friends in Brazil who were ordering boats from Australia, and they could order, well, I want this hull number or that hull number because the master rake was this or that, measured by the manufacturer. This cannot be good for the class. So somehow that has to all be sorted out too, doesn't it, Farzad?
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. I would hope, that someone from the laser class would be listening in and take some of your points, on board. Yeah, absolutely agreed. Okay.
Anything else that you want to add?
No, thank you very much. Supper time, I believe.
Well, it's 17:12 there. It's 5:12 on the East Coast. And we're just thinking about lunch here, but I appreciate very much your coming on. And I hope that if you get to San Francisco or the next time I'm on the East Coast, I hope to sit down with you and have a tea or a glass of something and talk some more about this. I sincerely hope that you and Mr. Usher, and it sounds like Sail, what is it, Sail Performance Australia, SPA, is that right? PSA, Performance Sailing Australia, have got to come to terms on measurement procedures, on the FRAN policy, on agreeing to other manufacturers, and for the sake of the sport, for the sake of the class, for the sake of the Olympics.
There are,
Julia, go ahead.
Yeah, I would recommend, and I'm sure you will, read the comments there, because there are many comments, and they have to do a lot with the FRAN, how it's defined, and making that public would be a good step in the
that's a good point Julia makes, and she always reminds us for every show we do, is that the comments are very instructive and very helpful. There has not been a single, there's been no name calling. Thank you to all of you who are watching. There's been, because our group is frankly a very good group of people, and we've only had to, I think, what, Julie, have you ever excused more than one or two people?
No.
So. And I thank all of you again today, as I do you, Mr. Rastegar, Farzad Rastegar, who is the head of Laser Performance, live with us for an hour and 15 minutes in Norwalk, Connecticut via Skype. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be with you.
Ciao.
Okay.
Talk
Bye-bye.
again. Ciao. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, that is quite a segment. And again, it's in response to an editorial that was done, that I ran on Sailing Illustrated, by Tracy Usher, who is the president of ILCA, the International Laser Class Association. Please go read that on the website. it was July 17th, I think it was. I had a slide up earlier in the show. And see their view, and we'll see how this shakes out. Any other responsible parties that want to make constructive response to this, either on my show Friday or in the meantime, I'll certainly consider that. And again, I appreciate very much having Farzad on the show.
And there is real concern on a couple levels.
Yeah.
Clear understanding of what's going on, and on availability of boats and parts, and for varieties of reasons. Well,
I think the model, my personal opinion, and I said it a minute ago, this model of the single manufacturer, one design. Now we have three manufacturers. We used to have a North American manufacturer. In fact, Mr. Rastegar merged what was laser performance here in the U.S., and they built the laser and the Sunfish and one or two other things, good friends of ours, and merged that with the European builder to create laser performance, whatever the corporate entity is. And that lack of a supplier in South America, lack of a supplier here has, I think, hurt the whole situation. But also, the other classes have this model we talked about where the class association is in charge. And they're, for sailors by sailors. And then the class association has the rights, and then they license builders. And I think if that were the case here, and the class association leadership was perhaps a little more reflective of the worldwide situation, because it does seem to be a split between, to a degree at least, between Europe and the U.S. or North America, then there would be, I think, a better understanding and a better. But tell me if I'm wrong. You all are listening, and John Bertrand saying, didn't Farzad just support the ILCA's approach of taking control of the laser class with his comment about seizing the boats being used at the Youth Worlds? And I'm not sure he said it in so few words, John, but he took a very hard line on those boats, which obviously didn't come from his manufacturer, that are being used in North America, and North America is in his footprint. So I don't understand either how these, in this day and age, how these zones, these territories are legal under both either European law or the U.S. anti-competitive law, but we'll see. Chad Stevens is saying, I think you're right, John. Are you the laser world champion, John Bertrand? Yes, that is Chad Stevens. That is our longtime friend, JB, whom I've known since at least the early 80s. And we've had John on the show. If you go look on Sailing on our Facebook page and on the videos on the side, you'll see all of our previous 205 shows, and JB was on here a couple months ago. Very interesting segment, by the way. And John Emmett is saying a North American manufacturer would probably help supply a lot. And John, of course, is a Brit. And I think you're right, John. Jamie Gilman is saying Laser UK purchased Vanguard. That was it. It was Vanguard, and merged the two to become Laser Performance. It's been downhill since then, so says Jamie Gilman. Jerry Roberts says they are carnet boats, and carnet meaning in the import-export sense of the word, not in the Spanish carnet meaning meat. They're carnet boats, and I think it's C-A-R-N-E-T in the French boats, and will be exported back to PSA's territory. More misinformation. Yeah, I don't quite understand, and I'm sure sailors as well. This is sort of like the dock situation in Auckland that Richard Gladwell follows for us and keeps, Julie, what I mean, and keeps us posted on. And I say, Richard, we don't want to get too involved in all that because, we just you follow that for us. We know it's going to sort out, and I suspect this is going to sort out on behalf of Sailors for Sailors. Because everybody wants this class in the Olympics, me included, us included, right? We included, including us.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there are some identifiable sticking points that ought to be cleared up.
Honestly, I feel like a couple of us could sit down. The America's Cup is a tough territory, and we've negotiated much more difficult commercial and other agreements in the America's Cup over the years.
Right.
And not that I'm the person to do it or volunteering to do it either way. But okay, thanks everybody. Let's carry on. Thanks to all of you who came on, and we'll see if we need to do any follow up with any of the other parties. And we'll certainly
and do read the comments and add some more. You can always add your own comments here.
And while we're at it here, Julia, we might also remind everybody that they can share.
Share, yes. If you have a friend who cares deeply one way or the other, do share this conversation with them.
Yeah, share, like, and subscribe. And if you are so inclined, go over to sailingillustrated.com and become a patron. We have now dozens of patrons via Patreon who give us $1 a month or $10 a month or more in some cases, and we appreciate very much that support. Okay, let's carry on with a Bravo Zulu. I think this was a cool thing out in Honolulu earlier. Well, over the weekend, they had the prize giving for the, the Transpac, and let me back up. Those were the last known pictures taken by, I think, Sharon Green of John Sangmeister's boat OEX. We've run those photos before, and OEX, as you probably most of you know, sank about 200 miles into the race a week ago Tuesday. Was it 2 weeks ago today? Yeah, I think it was. At dark 30, 0200 in the morning, and they were rescued by one of their competitors, and a team that they've not always gotten along real well with, by Pyewacket.
Other competitors on the water.
Well, they're competitors, but there's been some protests. We don't need to go into all that, but by Roy Pat Disney's Pyewacket, and at the prize giving in Honolulu a couple days ago for the Transpac, some very cool stuff happened. First of all, this is from the Transpac website. Finally, and they listed all the other prize winners, of course, and photos of the teams, but finally, a prize not planned in the program but appropriately presented at the ceremony was U.S. Sailing's Arthur B. Hansen Rescue Medal, awarded to Roy Disney and the crew of his Andrews 68 Pyewacket for their outstanding efforts in the rescue of John Sangmeister and his crew of the Santa Cruz 70 OEX. The rudder damage, fast sinking, and subsequent safe and timely rescue of the OEX team made headlines around the world. This is the first sinking in the history of, first time a boat has sunk in the Transpac, by the way. It made headlines around the world for the Pyewacket team's exemplary seamanship and sportsmanship to come quickly to the aid of a competitor in trouble at sea, because not only that, they couldn't finish the race. They doubled their crew from 12 to 24 or 11 to 12, whatever the numbers were. I can't remember now. And turned around and beat Cheeks for Marina del Rey. And that took 25 hours. Having an auditorium, this is at the prize giving, an auditorium full of peers who profoundly understand and appreciate the risk of offshore sailing. This dramatic story, retold in detail by Sangmeister, elicited tremendous emotion throughout the audience. And when Disney took the stage, the entire room rose in ovation to salute him and his crew, who were subsequently joined by the crew of OEX as well. And I'm pleased to say that this was read. John Sangmeister read, and I was hoping to have a video of it, but he got up on stage, as you just heard from the press. I assume that press release, Dobbs Davis wrote that, I'm not sure. But John went up on stage, and he read, because he's a member of the board of U.S. Sailing, he had actually proposed to U.S. Sailing that Pyewacket and Mr. Disney's team be awarded this Hansen Rescue Medal. So John went up on stage, and this is the last couple paragraphs of what he presented. He said the Hansen Medal was established in 1990 by friends of the late Mr. Hansen, a highly respected and accomplished ocean racing sailor from the Chesapeake Bay. The purpose of the Rescue Medal program is to recognize significant accomplishments in seamanship and to collect case studies of rescues for analysis by U.S. Sailing, the Safety at Sea Committee for use in U.S. Sailing's extensive educational training programs. Upon returning to the mainland on behalf of the OAX crew, I, John Sangmeister, nominated Roy Disney and the entire crew of Pyewacket for the U.S. Sailing's Hansen Award, which recognizes significant accomplishments in seamanship and valor. It is my privilege to serve on the U.S. Sailing Board. I'm pleased to report that the U.S. Sailing's President Corey Sertle and the Board of Directors have unanimously concurred with the nomination and have authorized me on behalf of U.S. Sailing to present Roy Disney and his crew with this rescue medal. That's John talking at the prize giving a couple days ago. And there is the crew, as we mentioned a minute ago in that press release, the Transpac press release. There is the guys who made it there back, because they would have long since finished both. Well, they returned to the mainland, long since returned to the mainland. Flew out to Hawaii, and you can see the guys in the blue shirts with their Hansen awards, the nice plaques, and then John's team with them in the Aloha shirts. It's a nice moment in the sport. Frankly, it's nothing special. You would have done it, Julia. I would have done it. Everybody in the race would have done it, and several other boats apparently did turn and go in that direction, or at least were listening, standing by until they heard that that Pyewacket was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So full marks to everybody involved. It's just a nice chapter in the sport, in the modern history of the sport, and in the Transpac, the 50th edition of the Transpac. And so we salute with a Bravo Zulu all involved. Congrats to OEX, congrats to Pyewacket and John Sangmeister, and of course Roy Pat Disney. Okay, cool stuff. And by the way, while we're at it, congratulations to the first to finish monohull. It was also first to finish last year, but last year you didn't get, or 2 years ago rather, you didn't get the barn door, but they've changed the prize giving program so that now Jim Cooney and Samantha Grant, now from Australia, the Australian owners of Comanche, that big VPLP 100 footer, and I think there were only 2 crew who returned from 2 years ago. You can see Stan Honey. Well, let me put that picture back up. Stan Honey in the upper second from right, and I think he told me who else was with them. The French guy who used to do I've done several America's Cup campaigns with. I'll think of his name.
What he did say was that they missed the breaking the record by hours.
Was it even hours? It was not by much.
Oh,
breaking their own record.
Yes, breaking their own record.
Right.
It was because everybody got caught after the race really started in the lee of Catalina Island.
How's that song go?
26 miles across the sea, Santa Catalina. It's waiting for me.
Waiting for me.
Anyway, that had they not, been everybody and been stuck, they would have broken the record.
Yeah, it was
again.
A little light at the start for that.
Light. It was 0.
Well, some teams actually got out of it, and those who were listening to Mark Michelson, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, congrats to Jim Cooney and Samantha Grant and their team, who were the first to finish the FTF monohull. They're in their Aloha shirts at the prize giving with the barn door.
Yes.
The cool trophy. Okay. Yes. Some America's Cup news. We told you about Sardinia, in Sardinia, as we say in English, and they are going to have the first America's Cup World Series regatta. And a cool video was put out by Luna Rosa Prada Pirelli a couple days ago. And it's in Italian, but with English subtitles. I think you will enjoy this, with Max Serena telling you why this is going to be a cool regatta and updating you a little bit on what their team is doing. Have a look at this.
Uno degli aspetti fondamentali del primo America's Cup World Series qui a Cagliari il prossimo anno sarà anche quello che appunto i team regatteranno insieme per la prima volta, quindi per la prima volta ci sarà un line-up tra i vari team, le varie barche, quindi sarà un buon test per capire dove ognuno è rispetto al proprio avversario. Quindi di sicuro è un vantaggio per tutti il fatto di regattare tutti insieme, perché si ha un po', no? È un po' un modo di misurare le performance, di vedere il lavoro fatto, e quindi sarà un momento importante per le campagne e per le sfide di tutti. È una classe nuova, completamente nuova, mai vista, e quindi credo che sarà un po' anche un modo per capire come si potrà regattare in queste barche, quindi sarà molto spettacolare anche da vedere. Pensiamo che tra luglio e agosto tutti i team vareranno barca 1, quindi sarà un momento importante perché si capirà che strada hanno preso i vari team, e poi da lì si inizia con lo sviluppo vero e proprio su barca 1 e la preparazione al primo evento ad aprile 2020 qui a Cagliari. Diciamo che abbiamo scelto Cagliari in realtà per 2 motivi principali. Uno per le condizioni meteo, perché alla fine era una delle location in Italia che ci garantiva più di 200 giorni di navigazione all'anno. Se uno deve fare uno sport che ha a che fare con il mare, direi che è una delle location migliori al mondo che io abbia mai conosciuto.
Well, I suppose a lot of you have been to Sardinia, probably not to Cagliari, which is where, let me go in here, which is where this is going to take place in Cagliari. But it is, it's a cool thing. It's a cool place to sail. I'll go back to that slide. And I recommend it to you. I have been to Cagliari. Most of you have been to Porto Cervo and the Emerald Coast in the northeast, the so-called Costa Smeralda, where the Yaga Khan's Yacht Club Costa Smeralda is located. They're just north of Olbia, where the airport is. This will be a cool event. It's in April next year, and you heard him talk about most of the teams now launching Barco Uno, the first boat, in July or maybe August. Well, it ain't launching in July. It's today's the 30th. And none of the teams have launched. In fact, I hear there's a further delay for these foil arms. The water bugs are not going to get launched. Boat ones are not going to get launched. Probably for another, maybe it's September now. I haven't talked to Terry Hutchinson or to Ben Ainsley or to anybody from ETNZ or Max Serena. But I will be checking in with them here this week and next to see what their later plans are, because we hear that things are further delayed in that department. Okay. Going on this week and next in South America are the Pan American Games, as the regional Olympic-style games, and there's a big sailing contingent as well, have been in these Panamericanos, Juegos Panamericanos, for many years, for decades. And we'll cover it on Friday. I haven't had time really to put it in today. We're an hour and a half into the show, but have a look at some pictures that came out. Here we go. Black. I can't help myself, and actually, this is Marco Grail and the Grail, famous Grail family, and Gabriel Borges and Stefano Peschiera, I think is Peschiera, from the 49er Brazil and the laser class. And I guess what is that, Peru? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what class, what this guy on the right, what country rather that flag is. But here, these pictures came from the Team Magic Marine. Now, Magic Marine, a big company now, and they supply gear for yacht racing and a couple other sports. But look at these pictures. Here we go again. Klaus Lang, two of the famous sailing family from Argentina, and the 49er, the Langes. And then look at this. Even the women are into it now. There's Martina Grail and Kahena Kunze with the, I don't know what to call this, the hard guy look, the crotonic countenance. I mean, excuse me, guys.
It's supposed to be fun.
It's supposed to be fun. Is this, are you trying to intimidate the competition? Is this, I mean, these are great sailors. The names are intimidating, let alone the, this is not, what do you call that? The cage fighting that goes on in the this is, excuse me, this is yacht racing, and these are cool, smart people who are great sailors. So I asked Ali Dinas, she sent me those photos. She saw them on her social media. So I said, send me a picture, Ali, that you think is the way we should celebrate ourselves. And we call this the gladiator girls. I mean, this is, if that's not intimidating, look at the abs on Ali there on the left. I don't know who her friend is, but equally fit. In any event, come on, guys and gals, can't we get with it here and smile and present our sport, celebratory and cool? Just go out on the race course and be intimidating there, and not the Mike Buckley. Taylor, I think, is on here watching, so I'm going to make fun of you a little bit, Taylor. The Mike Buckley and Taylor Canfield, which is kind of the Kiwi Maori look and the Kiwi all black look and the, I don't know. Julia, tell me if I'm wrong, huh?
Well, I agree with you, but I'm sure they think they look tough.
Well,
so it's like a football team, a college football team coming out all in black and not in their school colors.
Yeah, okay, but it's crotonic. Come on, let's have some fun. Okay, that wraps it up for us. I had to end on that note. Thank you all for joining us. Before we go away, let's go look. The comments are flowing in here. Yes, Katie, here we go. Let me back up. Julia, I don't want to get back any more of that laser stuff. Maybe we'll have some more laser stuff here on the show this week. Maybe we'll do a special pop-up. We'll see. John Shockey, this broadcast will be archived and available to watch shortly on the page, as I stated. Yes, immediately we go off the air, it's there in perpetuity and you're obviously welcome, but it's easy to watch. In fact, all of our previous 204 or 5 shows, was this 206, Julie? I can't remember.
Yes.
206 shows, bloody hell. Bill Wingrove says there was a standing ovation for the crews when the presentation was made to Paiwacket in Honolulu a couple days ago. Kent Pulliam as well. Hi, Kent. Katie Pettibone. And she says Julian Croissant. And yes, that's true. Julian was the guy. I've done 3 campaigns with him, America's Cup. He is a fine guy and a great sailor. He was on Comanche 2 years ago and was one of the only 2 returning crew, along with Stan Honey, or so Stan told me a week ago at St. Francis. Stan's coming on the show, as we told you last week. Stan and Sally have agreed to come on the show in due course and talk about DIMCO, the double-handed, multi-gender keelboat offshore, which he is a huge proponent of. And I think, Julie, he sort of sold you on that event too, hasn't he?
Yeah.
You like that event?
Yes, he sold me.
Okay. And, I mean, I've always supported the offshore event. Half the world does offshore sailing, or at least maybe not point-to-point offshore sailing, but, near shore racing, and I myself these days do, Andrews 50 or 49.9, but it's near shore racing in boats with tops, and, let's get that style of racing into the Olympics, but not at the expense of the fin. Stan says the fin is the DIMCO, the double-handed multi-gender keelboat offshore, DMKO as I call it, is not what got the fin flicked. It was the penchant by some in the leadership in world sailing to have identical number of medals and events, and in similar identical classes for both men and women. And I've made the argument, and I continue to make the argument, if the women want to have a 3-person, and they get a medal, 3 medals, for a 3-person match racing event, like they had in Weymouth in 2012, which was by all accounts the best of those Olympic events in terms of TV, in terms of spectator interest, and even the closeness of the racing. And that counts as an event and a medal, and it's 3 women getting 3 medals, and then that is balanced by the fin, which is just 1 medal, 1 athlete, 1. We got to do what's right for our sport, not trying to add up exactly the. You think a sport like synchronized swimming has exactly the same number of medals or events for men and women? I don't think so. So we have to do what's right for our sport. And I'm pleased to say that there is a submission from a number of countries. I've seen the draft now that it's being submitted by the August 1 deadline to World Sailing for discussion at their meetings in Bermuda in November. There's a submission to delay this whole madness, this governance proposal, which would really make World Sailing a top-down organization. It would completely gut the council. It would completely make this small board of directors. It would make it corporate governance with a small board of directors and an all-powerful CEO. And that proposal is poison. And I'm delighted to see a number of countries, I think including the U.S. and Canada, saying, hey, let's put this off, and some of the other countries of our watchers, of our viewers here. And I urge you to get in touch with your member national authorities and ask them about this governance proposal, ask them where they stand. And, I mean, you go read it. I put it up, and I'll put it up again. Go read it and see what you think. Don't take my word for it that it's cretonic, but it is.
Still remains that only small men and young ones can participate in the Olympics.
Well, that is exactly right, and that we need the fin back. And I'm also pleased to say that there is a really good proposal, a good submission, I think, from Canada, forthcoming, if it's not already been submitted, that other countries are starting to get behind, which will rebalance, and it will not have exactly the same. If you got 2 people in a female class and only 1 in the fin class, and you say, well, those 2 events at least balance the number of events. I don't care that there's 2 medals to women and only 1 to men, and therefore there's more medals going to women in sailing than there are to men in a bottom line number. Let's have the proper events and not get too worried about some of this other stuff. Our sport has always been, since Paul Henderson was president back in the 90s, he moved our sport rather quickly and way ahead of most of the other sports to gender equity. I wouldn't call it equality, and we still have room to go in all of our clubs and classes and so on to get more, as you heard Mr. Rastegar say, more and more women involved. But, we've done not a perfect job, but a pretty good job on women, but we got a long way to go on people from all walks of life into our sport, but we don't need to get into that now here, do we, Julia?
Not now.
No. Okay. So, due to the style of construction of the league, I don't want to get into it anymore, Jerry. Let's just kind of go on. Bill Wingrove saying Friday was the best start day, meaning during Transpac. One tack out to Catalina with breeze all the way. Yeah, if you started on Wednesday, that's one of the problems with starting boats on different days, as some of these big events do, and it's to help try to get everybody out there more or less the same time. It never does. But you start some of the slower boats on Wednesday, faster boats on Friday, and then the real fast boats on Saturday is how they did it again this year. Scott McLeod, the esteemed marketing director for American Magic, New York Yacht Club's America's Cup team. Hi to you, Scott, Marcos, Dave Court, Chad Stevens. Alex, I'm not going to go back into that. Jack Wirtz, there's a new name. Hi, Jack. I recognize your name. And a lot of comments, Croutonic countenance. Come on, Allie. Look at my double chin. It's terrible for me, but these other young sailors can do it. And it looks just as ridiculous, even if they don't have a double chin. Mark Curtis saying, but Tom, the youngest generation watching, presumably to be influenced, likes this kind of a look and laughs about it also, but they like it, and that's what's important in the promote. It's not. They don't really like it, and it's embarrassing. I mean, come on. And besides, it's not just the younger generation. We need to have people from 8 to 80 or 7 to 90, tell me what the numbers are, that like the sport, that are attracted to the sport, who will watch it on TV, who will find the personalities interesting, and frankly, people who are smiling with their arms around each other, thumbs up, aloha, that whole approach to me is a lot more attractive across the board than Croutonic countenance. Come on. Still no news on the ETNZ test boat mule. No, Anders, I haven't heard any more, but I hear they're building boat 1 too, apace. And I reported on that on Tuesday's show. Ben Nichols, I feel PSA, okay, I'll take this comment, PSJ and ILCA are key parts of this debate. They should step forward and give their perspective. Okay, I'm not opposed to that, Ben, and thank you for your help in teeing some of this up. If anyone from any of those three, if Tracy wants to come back on, if somebody from presumably PSA, because that seems to be where the tension is, or the loggerheads are between PSA and performance, laser performance.
I don't understand if the FRAN has been approved and agreed to by all parties, what the problem is.
Well, I think first thing is that it's been approved by Laser Performance. I didn't hear that it was approved by the others. I don't know. I heard him say that he signed the documents, Farzad, Rastegar, and he's going to put them up on his website. So is that what you heard him say?
I thought that
we'll go back and listen. We'll go back and listen. But
go
ahead.
Now, I think that the Japanese had not agreed, and I thought I heard him say that
I don't know. It's kind of a he said, she said thing, and I bloody hell. Allie Nas, yes, please, on match racing in the Olympics. I thought that was a terrific event. The men with the Solings was problematical because the Soling, we tried to, it was a hermaphrodite. We started with men in the Soling class doing fleet racing, and then when you got to the end of the event, the top X-Mini teams, I think it was 8, went to the match racing, and that was probably not really good. But we got match racing into the Olympics that way, and we had to use an existing class. Josh Toso, the esteemed marketing manager for U.S. Sailing. Hi, Josh. In my opinion, match racing or team racing needs to be in the Olympics. Exciting and best format for broadcast viewing, and can be mixed gender. Josh Tozo is saying. Josh, I couldn't agree more. And it is very difficult to understand fleet racing on TV, even for sailors. Even with Stan Honey's or ARL down in New Zealand, the Ian Taylor outfit that is going to do the graphics for the next America's Cup. Even with those kinds of graphics, it's hard. In this medal race, so they tried to simplify it by saying, well, we'll have X many races, and then the top 10 boats will go into the medal race, and it'll be a double counting race. Well, how often is it that the winner of the medal race doesn't get the gold medal, or maybe doesn't even get a medal? The gold medalist finishes down 4th or 5th, or maybe doesn't even have to sail the race. So that didn't solve things. If you want to do a final winner-take-all race, you need, in my opinion, to do one of two things. Either what Russell Coutts has been advocating for years, and he's saying the 100-yard dash, you don't have several 100-yard dashes and you add up your times and average them or something. He said you have a 100-yard dash and the winner wins. And if you have a lousy start or you pull a muscle or some other bad luck, tough luck. He said put the top 10 boats or the top X many boats in a winner-take-all final race and award the medals accordingly. That'd be much easier to understand on TV. I kind of like the old format where everybody added up their points, low point scoring. You could see how they were going to do, especially if there were no throwouts. It made that even easier. But what we're doing right now does not make sense, and especially fleet racing is difficult to present on TV, whereas, and likewise, team racing, frankly, is pretty hard as well. Match racing is pretty simple, as we saw at Gov Cup 2 weekends ago, Rose Cup, the America's Cup. And if people who are non-sailors come and look at our Olympic television, they say, well, why don't we have America's Cup style racing in the Olympics? Isn't that the pinnacle of your sport? You don't do that? You mean the NBA plays 5-on-5 basketball, but you're playing 3-on-3 basketball here and you're sailing, the equivalent of it? You're doing something else? The Star Sailors League has a terrific format, in my not so humble opinion. And they're going to have the eliminations in their big deal starting in 2021, but even now in their Star Sailors League using the star boats, when they get to Nassau in December, and at their other events, they have one in, I think, Hamburg, Germany, I'm not sure where else, the lakes in Italy or Switzerland. They get to a final race. They take the top 4 boats coming out of their preliminary racing. They go racing head-to-head. It's a simple windward, leeward, 4 legs, 2 laps, and no pumping rules. You can pump to your heart's content, and whoever crosses the finish line gets the gold medal, wins that event. Second place, silver. Third place, bronze. Fourth place gets a certificate or gets, to buy everybody drinks. I don't know. And that's pretty cool. And it's understandable for sailing. It's understandable in sailors and non-sailors, at least, again, in my not so humble opinion. So, Josh, that's a long screed on what you excited me about. Thank you. Lori Kaikinen. Hi, Lori. With the level of misinformation going around, I would love an open table FAQ, frequently asked questions style, to lift some clouds over the whole thing. Yeah, Lori, it's Farzad is very articulate, and he I don't know if he's a lawyer, but he's obviously thinking in terms of the contracts and in terms of the business, whereas all the rest of us, most of the rest of us, are worried about the sport and sailing. Neil Collingridge, sounds like PSA have not approved, presumably because they'd like to sell lasers in LP territory. And therein, I'm sure, lies the rub, is that Mr. Rastegar wants to protect his territory and his IP rights and doesn't want others coming in and selling in North America and South America and wherever else he's got rights, Europe, obviously, and tell me where. I really think it's better for the Olympics for everybody to be able to build a boat, provided the class approves and provided the boat measures. And somebody like Mr. Rastegar, who has a big company and is apparently building a lot of very good boats, will come, the cream will rise to the top, the creme de la creme. Did I mix a metaphor there, Julia? I'm not sure. Huh?
Yes.
Did I mix some metaphors there?
Or 2.
Or 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Okay, it's we're an hour and almost 50 minutes into this, so let's wrap this up. I want to thank, I've got Mr. Farzad back on there because that's the last shot we had of him in Norway. Thanks again to Farzad Rastegar, who came on live via Skype from Norwalk, and I appreciate very much him coming on. We want to thank those of you who gave us photos and videos today, including all of these folks. And I want to invite you to join us on Friday. If we do a pop-up show, there's a chance we'll do a pop-up show between now and Friday. There's a lot of interest in this laser issue, and we may air some more of that. And now that Julie and I don't have to go to St. Francis on Wednesdays and do their live streaming because they've hired a crew to do that, so we're happy to be out of that. We may do something even tomorrow, Wednesday. Keep an eye on Sailing Illustrated. We'll obviously tell you if we do decide to do that. And then if not, we'll for sure hope to see you on Friday for our regular TFE Live, which of course is every Tuesday and Friday at 1300 Pacific, 1600 Eastern, 2000 UTC, and in New Zealand, 0800 the next morning, and even earlier the next morning in Australia. Big crowd on here. Thank you all for joining us. Hope to see you Friday. In the meantime, sail fast, sail safe and smart, and have fun. Ciao. Bye.